Happy Friday. Welcome to This Week in the TERF Wars. Please let me know as soon as you can if you can hear me and that all the sound's good. This week's been a bit of a mad rush. I thought I'd finally finalise a time. 9 p.m. Fridays, 9 p.m. UK time. Is going to be every week. So, there's a bit of fuzz on the green screen down there. Technical difficulties. Yes. And of course, as soon as I picked a time, it was suddenly really difficult for me to make it because, of course. Anyway, welcome to This Week in the TERF Wars, Season 2, Episode 4. It's exciting. So for those of you who are new, This Week in the TERF Wars is where I go through the last week's worth of nonsense from transphobic people, gender critical people, TERFs, and we address the arguments, or we laugh at the arguments, or quite often both. So it should be fun. I'm just going to try and see if I can deal with the fuzz in the corner of the room there. How frustrating. That wasn't there like 3 minutes ago, I promise you. I'm not sure what the best solution is. Perhaps we'll just ignore it. Is everything working? Can you hear me, chat? What's going on? Cooking now. I can't tell if you can hear me. The chat doesn't seem to be working. For goodness sake. Oh, you can hear me. Oh, okay. Oh, how embarrassing. I'm sorry, everyone. Not quite sure what happened there. Okay, right. For goodness sake. Every single time, huh? Right. Well, let's get on with it. So, anyway, sorry about that, guys. So, this week was actually really good. So, obviously, the main piece of news was that Donald Trump is gone. Yay! So isn't that exciting? So now America has President Biden, who has to be a step up from Trump. So that's a success. And amazingly, one of the first things that President Biden did was sign in this new executive order. There's all kinds of political stuff. Executive orders are different from laws and the different whatever. But anyway, it's a big deal. And basically what he's done is signed in, so according to the Human Rights Campaign here, just issued an order protecting Americans against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, a turning point in our fight for equality under law. And it's like the most sweeping pro-LGBT legislation ever for America. In lots of ways, they've kind of caught up with the UK. So you can't be fired from your job for being LGBT, you can't be discriminated for housing protections, you can't be denied a loan. Like, there is so much education, everything, and it's really incredible. So this is off the back of a Supreme Court case that happened in 2020, or finished in 2020, where a trans woman called Amy Stevens, who passed away before the ruling, came through, which is sad, but she was fired for being trans from her job, and she took it all the way to the Supreme Court and she won, which is incredible. So this is such a big deal, like, for Americans. I'm not an American myself, but I have lots of American friends and I love all the Americans in the chat, and this is just, so this is amazing news. So of course, because it's good news, you know what that means. That means that gender critical people hated it. So here is the UK's own LGB Alliance. It's hard to even say LGB Alliance without saying the T. LGB Alliance, which is a, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a group who was formed in the UK And the idea is to try and oppose trans rights and use gay people as a shield. So they're like, oh, we support LGB people, but not trans people. That's like the whole thing. So Biden's just brought in protection for gay people for housing and education and, healthcare, so much stuff across the country, like the biggest deal. And of course, LGB Alliance, because they're a fake organisation that do not give a shit about gay people. They are, they're opposed to it, obviously. So they've said, we're appalled by the President of the United States executive order raising the sex-based rights of women and girls. So as part of this ruling, it means that you can't ban trans women from things, which is obviously a good thing. And in lots of cases, like in many states, that's been the law for years or even decades, as it has in England. And it's more that there is a lot of pushes for bathroom bills and that kind of nonsense going on in the USA at the moment. And this kind of hopefully adds a lot more weight to those being blocked when they come to court. I don't understand the American law system. Anyway, this is a good thing. LGB Alliance, of course, are angry about it. Like they're saying here, deals a severe blow to women and girls in sports, prisons, rape shelters, hospitals. It doesn't deal a blow to those, because having to share with 0.3% or whatever it is of the population who are trans people, many of which in most states you've already been sharing with your entire life, as LGB Alliance, who are based in the UK, know, because they've had to share all these things with trans people in the UK for their entire lives. And it's obviously fine. Like, it's just obvious transphobia here. We will come on to sport in a minute, which is a slightly different case. Anyway, I know the complaining about gays and lesbians not having their own spaces. I mean, there wasn't a law before banning trans people from gay bars. Like, what are you on about? That's just completely nonsense. Trans people have always been in gay bars, obviously, because some of them are gay. Like, even if you ban the straight trans people, there'd still be gay trans people. So, obviously makes no sense. So they're going to be wasting all their time campaigning against that. So that's a good thing. So some of their followers were also really angry. In less than 8 hours' time, Biden, so that's how long it took from inauguration to him signing this, Biden has issued an executive order rivaling Trump's worst over 4 years. So, like, Trump was attacking, I mean, even if we just, like, Trump attacked loads of stuff, obviously. You all know this, you're all completely sick of it, but particularly, like, he attacked women's right to abortions, he blocked equal pay laws for women, like, loads of stuff for, like, just women's rights. Like, obviously, even more so for gay rights. The Trump administration tried to make it legal so that LGBT people could be denied healthcare by, like, homophobic and transphobic healthcare providers, which would be, like, fatally horrific. People in the past in America have died from that. So, complete nonsense. The idea that letting trans women go to the toilet and various other things, it's already been happening in, like, half the states legally, and happening anyway because there isn't any sensible way to actually implement a ban in all the other states. They're trying to claim that, like, his Muslim ban, his, like, his border wall, like, all of it was so much worse. It's just such a joke. This is the problem with when gender critical people become part of the, like, hive mind of gender critical, they're, like, in the culty centre of it. It becomes such a single issue thing for them. It is literally the most important thing to them. So it doesn't matter if there's, like, children in cages in concentration camps, because, well, yeah, of course. I mean, what's a million kids in cages? We're talking about 0.3% of the people in the toilet with you will continue to be trans. So, watch out. Garbage. Anyway, one of the big flashpoints was because Abigail Shrier, who's, well, I won't, it's not all her, but she was the one who was trending most on Twitter, said that the new ruling eviscerated women's sports, and of course that meant that Biden erased women was trending on Twitter. So that's the new thing. Biden has erased women. So as I can see, by 100% of the chat is clearly men. That obviously worked. And, you know, life without women will be kind of rubbish. Sorry, that was probably a rubbish joke. Anyway, it's just complete nonsense, over-exaggeration. And it was very focused on sports in the Twitter argument, because that's a good way of radicalizing in people who don't know anything about trans people. They, like you say, did you know they want men to be able to play your favourite sport along with women? And then all of the idiots instantly think of boxing or UFC or MMA, and they're like, what? A man beating up a woman? Suddenly I oppose trans rights. And then you get this kind of argument over and over again. You get two arguments. You either get this one, which we're about to go through, and then the, what, you think a woman should be able to fight a man in a ring? Like, that isn't what we're saying. But this one is a classic one. This person says, 100 meter dash Rio 2016, the slowest man was 10.06 seconds. The fastest woman was 10.71 seconds. And then compares the world records. So the slowest man in the finals breaks the woman's world record. It's not a level playing field, pun intended. So you're comparing the slowest cis man against the fastest cis woman, and therefore trans people are bad? Like, all of their arguments are like this. They're like, what? So you saying that a man can't run faster than a woman? Like, yes, in general, men can run faster than women, in general. And the fastest men can run faster than the fastest women in the world. Yeah, cool. We're not talking about trans people there, though, are we? Like, you haven't actually included the world record for trans women in your little comparison of world records. So I was like, well, what's the trans women's world record then, mate? You seem to have missed that out of your post about trans women. Bearing in mind, his post got I think it's got 4,000 likes now. He's replying to Abigail Schreier, who's the author of the transgender craze seducing our daughters. Anyway, so then he's like, well, since there's no trans women category, no record exists. That's the whole problem, mate. Maybe there ought to be a separate space for them to compete. Just proving their ignorance here. Trans women have been allowed to compete in the Olympics since 2004. So that's quite a few Olympic Games. I didn't know. They happen every 2 years, don't they? There's a summer one and there's a winter one. There's a summer one, something like that. I don't like sports. Anyway, so the fact that there's not an Olympic record isn't because there's no trans women allowed to compete. It's because none have ever been good enough to even qualify to go to the Olympics. So that's why there's not an Olympic record, but that doesn't explain why there's not a world record. Because if there's not a world record, then I could run 100 meters tomorrow down my road in 45 seconds or something embarrassing. And then I would be the world's fastest trans woman. But actually, that's probably not true, because there's almost certainly several people claiming to be the fastest trans women who probably are running, I don't know, whatever, 11 seconds. I have no idea, I don't know what I'm talking about, but slower than the women's world record, because otherwise they would hold the women's world record, because they would have been allowed to compete in the last few Olympic Games. So this is complete nonsense. It's just saying cis men can run faster than cis women, therefore trans women who are neither of those two groups shouldn't be allowed to compete. That's the argument. And obviously that just doesn't hold up in the slightest. So, I mean, you just get the amount of my notifications that were just this argument rephrased. It's completely nonsense. So another thing that pissed them off, which was also amazing, was the most pithy, thing, which was the White House, when you go on their thing to write them a little note saying, I love America, or whatever you write in the White House thing. The White House thing, they changed on day one to ask your pronouns. So you have a choice of she, he, they, other, or prefer not to share. Really completely inconsequential. For a small number of trans people, they'll look at this and they'll be like, wow, this is really good. Compared to Trump, how shit he was. It's like a small old signal that just says, We aren't going to try and ruin your lives like the last administration. And for everyone else, it literally doesn't matter. You don't have to pick this item. You can pick prefer not to share. It doesn't matter. And of course, Ben Shapiro, who's an American conservative commentator, celebrity idiot, said, the administration that values objectively verifiable facts has begun. The thing is though, mate, pronouns are objectively verifiably a thing. Like, they do exist. And when you're talking to someone on the internet and they don't upload an original copy of their birth certificate plus legal ID plus some kind of super check, like, that they might use for PayPal or something, you're going to have to ask them whether they're a man or a woman in order to... You're going to have to ask their pronouns. Like, even if you aren't talking to a trans person, even if you have no idea, or you're just going to have to guess and go with they, them, or prefer not to share or whatever. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not even an attempt to make sense. It's literally just, they've asked for people's pronouns, which I know is a signal to trans people. So I'm angry. And my brand is that I say fact a lot, even though I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to string something together and post it out and get 9,000 likes. Because, of course, I mean, this post probably went on to get like 20,000 or something. He always gets a crazy amount of likes. Not that really matters, but it's just so dumb. Like, objectively verifiable facts. As if asking for someone's pronouns isn't an objectively verifiable... I mean, I guess the argument that he was going for is that, like, he's one of the people who's talked about biological pronouns, as if your pronouns are somehow tied to your gametes or something. We look at your genitals before we determine what your pronouns are. But even then, online, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, even if you said, I'm only going to call people by the pronouns that match their genitals when they were a baby, because I, for some reason, think that's important, then you're still going to have to ask them that on the internet. Anyway, so I made a series of posts about this. This isn't just me flashing one of my tweets off here. It's relevant to the next thing. I was like, so TERFs were trending as well. It was a whole big thing. You know, every time anything happens, trans people have to trend on Twitter and then everyone has to get a load of abuse because, of course. So I was like, TERFs, because that was trending, are part of the patriarchy. Their allies are social conservatives and fascists like Trump. They consistently campaign against equality legislation for LGBT people and women. Many countries have had all the trans rights Biden just signed in without issue for years. So, like, that one's just plainly a fact, because, I mean, the UK's already got all the things that they've just signed in. This one, we've just seen LGB Alliance campaigning against these things. I mean, of course it's true that their allies are social conservatives and Trump. I mean, Trump was pushing all of the gender critical policies. Ben Shapiro is like one of the most famous social conservative voices in the world at the moment, and he agrees with them in his own ridiculous way. And I think that warrants them being part of the patriarchy, along with the whole worldview, which I don't really need to go into here. But I got a slam dunk of replies. I was really pleased with this. So I got 3 replies in a row. One says, it's literally the opposite, dear. So this was a gender critical person who went on to argue that actually trans people are part of the patriarchy and somehow them, even though they agree fully with the patriarchy, aren't part of it. The next person was a men's rights activist who said, no patriarchy equals no civilization, which is a classic, like, men's rights activist move. Like, when a feminist would say, well, the patriarchy's bad, they'll be like, well, if it wasn't for the patriarchy, we wouldn't have landed on the moon, or some kind of total garbage like that. And then you can link them that picture of the lady who wrote the Moonlander code standing next to the code with all of her, like, books of, like, handwritten code. That's what I always do whenever that one comes up. And then the third one was a fascist apologist who said, you don't even know what fascism is, do you? And I just thought it was such a brilliant, like, for me saying, actually, TERFs are part of the patriarchy and are allied with fascists. And then we get one turning up saying, no, that's not true. And then we get a part of the patriarchy and a fascist. I was just like, ah! Dunno, just QED, mate. Done. So, and of course, like, there were so many angry gender critical people about this whole thing. So here is a gender critical person sharing Breitbart News, the far right conspiracy theory-esque news site. Thanks GC women who voted for Biden despite him openly aligning with the trans lobby throughout his campaign. Disappointment is an understatement. And this goes back to what I was just saying about how the priorities get totally skewed. Like, how can, even for gender critical people, or just imagine that you're someone who genuinely thinks that you're defending women's rights and you genuinely are opposing trans rights because you feel like that's the correct, morally correct, statistically correct, whatever way to do it. Even then, how could you possibly claim that that was more important than getting rid of a fascist who had tried a coup on the country and who opposed like abortion and so many other things that are just so much more important than where someone else like goes to the toilet or whether they can get a loan as an LGBT person. Like even if you're opposed to it, it just doesn't make any sense. So the idea that people genuinely would have voted for Joe Biden but instead voted Trump because of trans rights is just, this is mad. Absolutely mad. Anyway, so that was the main event of the week, and that was quite a spicy time. I had like several tweets which were trending, which was, it's always tedious because then your notification is like, and you get like, I don't know, I think I was getting maybe 10 a minute or something of just idiots coming in and saying nonsense. But overall, I mean, it's actually quite positive. It's such a positive ruling, and like for a lot of people, it was the first time like Biden erased woman was trending on Twitter, and you click on it and then you see a load of people angry that trans people can go to the toilet, and you're just like, what is going on? So a lot of people were posting like, I genuinely thought Joe Biden might have done something bad, and then I clicked this and saw it's just a load of transphobes. And like there were so many people saying that. You know, people do recognise this stuff for what it is. It's very easy to get caught up in it and feel like they're convincing people, but they're really not. And this was just a huge win for all LGBT people. Anyway, on to the random junk. There's quite a lot of random junk this week. So this is some gender critical people talking amongst themselves. And I found this because that's the same person as this person, and this person was involved in this discussion. So anyway, that's this crazy tongue person here. So the top person's like, I love stirring the pot. Please tell me your unpopular radfem opinions. Once again, I'll start. A lot of you are just transphobic. So this is, I think, bad enough on its own, because I actually think, I don't know about most, probably most, radical feminists aren't transphobic and aren't TERFs. They're just, radical feminism is just a branch of feminism. Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't have to be a transphobic position. And so this person is saying of their friends and their radical feminist, like, cohort, group, I don't know, a lot of them are just transphobic. And I think that's horrible. Why would you want to be friends with people who are transphobic if you weren't? It's like saying, oh, lol, some of you are just racists. Like, why would you want to be friends with racists? Like, why would you want to be friends with someone who's got an irrational prejudice against anything? It's just horrible. It's just you making excuses for it. I don't know. But anyway, of course it got a lot worse. The next person says, okay, I'll go next. There's nothing wrong with being transphobic, since transgenderism is simply an expression of misogyny. So no such thing as being transphobic. So, you know, when they like ban trans people from adopting children, that's not an irrational prejudice against trans people. That is somehow fighting against misogyny. So the next person comes in and agrees with them. You're not wrong. Transgender ideology is misogynistic to its core. It can't be separated. In that sense, transphobia is really just misogynist phobia. No, misogynist phobia. And how bad is that? I hate misogynists, and I'm allowed to be scared of men who get off invading female boundaries. And this is just like standard gender critical buzz phrases all linked together. Like, this is, I mean, obviously what they're saying is just totally nonsense in so many levels, but even just like from a finding a flaw with their argument position, there are so many things for transphobia, like adopting children, or like being banned from the military, or like being attacked on the street for existing as a trans person. Like, are you really saying that that's a good thing? There's nothing wrong with being transphobic. Transphobia is an irrational prejudice of people. So even if you think, oh, trans women should be banned from the toilets, and I have a valid reason, which you don't, then all you're really saying is that isn't transphobia, because you're saying you have a rational reason to oppose them. But instead, these people are just saying, I think being irrational is good. I think being prejudiced against people is good. And my justification is that trans people existing is an attack on women. But even then, lots of transphobia is not even arguably anything to do with that. But also, of course, this is completely false. And trans women who are the trans people they're offended about, because they never care about any other type of trans person, are affected by misogyny and are often the victims of misogyny from gender critical people. So completely nonsense. But I just think it's like, I do think this is becoming more common, where TERFs and gender critical people are just being more open about being just transphobic. I think that, like, you can't really hide from that observation, because there are some positions which are just obviously that. So, like, I mean, they'll still try and gaslight you and deny it, but they know it. Like, lots of them do. Right, so on to some more random riffraff. So this is Victoria Derbyshire, I don't know, has some TV channel or something. And she says, this is great, by the way. From today, in the UK, those experiencing domestic abuse will be able to go into Boots or an indie chemist and seek help. If they say the code word, Annie, they'll be taken to a private room and asked if they want to call 999 or a domestic abuse helpline. Annie stands for Action Needed Immediately. And this is great for like a whole number of reasons. You know, domestic violence and being trapped with an abusive partner must be at an all-time high now, as everyone's in lockdown. It's very hard to ask for help. It's very difficult to, you know, say the word help. And also can be really dangerous, because you might be with your partner, you might be with your child, who might be like, oh, mummy asked for help in the chemist today. Like, you might just need some way of just saying something that you know can get you help. And importantly, there's no downside to this at all. Like, is there? At worst case, someone says someone's name and they're like, oh, did you need to come into the room? And you're like, what? No, oh, sorry. Like, okay. And then this person's angry about it. And they've said, why is this necessary? Women don't need a special word to signal they need help. Like, do not care about what women might need at all. They can just say, I need help. What women do need is for people to stop using our pronoun to include men who like to fetishize dressing up to ape our looks and mannerisms. Like, it's just so desperate. We weren't talking about trans people, trans women who are also the victims of domestic abuse. So they also might need to use this service. And of course, men who might need to use this service, and everyone else. So it's just so like, first of all, they're ignoring that men can be victims of domestic abuse and trans people and everyone else. Then they're just throwing away the actual needs and concerns of people who face domestic abuse. And then they're just making it about trans people. It's completely pointless. Just go away. And then, of course, using our pronoun, like, pronouns are a construct of language. They don't belong to a people, like a class of people. And there's not any one of them. And being trans isn't a fetish. And trans people don't ape looks and mannerisms. Like, this is a good example of a gender critical person who is defending gender stereotypes. They'll say they oppose gender stereotypes, but then when a trans woman has makeup, they'll say, stop trying to appropriate womanhood. It's like, makeup isn't part of womanhood. You're not a woman because you wear makeup. Makeup doesn't belong to women. Makeup is a thing that more women use than men, and it is stereotypically associated with femininity, but that is a gender stereotype. That's what trans people are fighting against. That's what real feminists are fighting against. And if you were actually critical of gender stereotypes, then you would say that there is no such thing as aping someone's look. Nonsense. So we've got one from Mumsnet here. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's all kind of nonsense, but I just thought this first line was really funny. So they're all complaining, they're, telling each other nonsense and believing each other. They're doing this like echo chamber thing where they hype each other up. So there's like, exactly, for some, all a little girl has to do is pick up a toy dinosaur and, oh my god, a boy. I was the girl who liked rock music, wrestling, sci-fi, video games and skateboarding. Still a girl though. I'd have half the bloody internet transing me, and if it had been around when I was growing up. Firstly, there were trans kids when you were growing up, so fuck off. But secondly, what are you talking about? Like, trans kids have to go through the most ridiculous hoops to get where they want. They have to come out to their parents, which is a huge deal, and then they have to see a therapist and discuss with loads of people and go on a waiting list for absolutely years and deal with all this kind of like abuse and stuff. And, there's so much to coming out. And it's nothing to do with toy dinosaurs. What are you talking about? When I was little, I liked some of those things. I liked toy dinosaurs. I liked some rock music, really. I'm a metalhead. I like sci-fi. I like Super Mario. And I'm still a woman. So it's actually nothing to do with that, is it? Like, if the straw man version of their world existed where a girl would become a boy because she liked dinosaurs, then that would imply that there weren't any trans women who like dinosaurs. But dinosaurs are cool, so fuck off. Absolutely makes no sense at all. It's just one of the little things where they will like to tell each other that, oh, when I was a kid, I used to like breathing, and nowadays if you breathe, they just trans you. You can't even escape. One day you say, Mum, I like the colour blue, and then 2 minutes later they've given you genital reassignment surgery and there's nothing you can do about it. And they all big each other up on this kind of nonsense all the time. So, I thought this one was so close to self-awareness moment. So, Dr. Stock is a philosophy professor in the UK who is currently doing the gender critical tour where you say something and people say that's bullshit, and then you claim you're being silenced and instantly get like you write a book and go on the news and get headlines in the Daily Mail and the Times and all this kind of stuff. So she's currently doing the tour. The last person who did it was Suzanne Moore. In 2 months' time there'll be another one because they seem to like, they want to keep it in the news. They want to keep their silenced look going like constantly all the time. So but this was just like a little moment where she like got so close to realizing. She was like gazing out at my tiny garden under lowering English skies and musing about how weird it is to be used as an instrument in a US culture war raging thousands of miles away by people who have literally no idea what law is here or situations in institutions and don't care either. Like, the people who are using you are people like the Heritage Foundation and Alliance Defending Freedom, who are these like socially conservative, super right-wing, like pro-family values, anti-LGBT, anti-women being able to do anything groups, like the patriarchy. And they're the people who are using you as an instrument in a culture war because you share values and views with them. And I'm not being used in a culture war. Like, that's not available to me because I'm not a useful tool of someone who wants to boost their career in the short term to get loads of media interviews by lying about being silenced. So, but obviously didn't quite realise. Because they'll never realise. Because if you did realise, if you were capable of realising, then you wouldn't be in that position, would you? So, I replied to that. There was some other stuff. And I was like, this is nonsense because... Actually, why have I put this one in? Anyway, oh yeah, okay. So I was like, this is nonsense. The problem is that gender critical people can't actually provide a rational argument, and that's why you're silenced. Because when you're like, oh, I'm really worried that the moon is going to turn into a giant dog and eat the earth, then people are going to be like, no. And they're like, I'm being silenced. You're not listening to my arguments. What about the giant dog? Like, there are some positions that when you don't provide any evidence, people aren't going to be able to give you any time, are they? Because it's just going to be nonsense. Similar stuff here. And they've said, biology is evidence. Irrefutable scientific fact. So here we go. They're about to prove me wrong with science and logic. An irrefutable science fact. You have a vagina. He has a penis, some other guy in the conversation. Even without them, you're both still female and male. It's not about disagreement. It's about denying solid biological truth and marginalising. It's important to many actual women. So, biological fact here, as proven by this person, I am a woman. End of. They just always do that. We can always tell. So this was on the similar thread, talking about people being silenced. And I was like, well, you're not being silenced because you're doing like a world tour of media organisations telling everyone your position, because all that actually happened was some of your colleagues said, this is transphobic, stop being transphobic. So I said, whenever you criticise transphobes, they don't rebut the criticism, they go to the mainstream press and whine about being silenced. And this absolutely incredible comment. This guy said, but she's not, as far as I'm aware, being criticised. Maybe the reason you're not aware of it, mate, is because she isn't silenced and her critics are silenced. Like, where are the trans people going on the news and like saying her position is rubbish? Where's the counter arguments? You haven't even heard the counter arguments. 600 people signed a letter, 600 of her colleagues signed a letter saying her position was bullshit and wrote some criticism on it. Some people have written like, multiple 1,000-word articles going through her positions one at a time and taking them apart. I should link those in the description because there's a really good one by a lady called Krista Peterson. And this guy's not aware of it, and he's trying to claim that Dr. Stock is being silenced when he's heard of her and he hasn't even heard of her critics. Like, beyond parody. It's just so ridiculous. Like, imagine just writing that. Like, I'm not even aware of the criticism. Like, oh God. Okay, so this one's really grim. And I was in two minds about whether to include this one. So I'll just deal with the second part first. So this is pro-conversion therapy hate group transgender trend saying some nonsense that we'll move on to in a sec. But this person has seen what they're lying about above and said, I actually wished I live in the USA and had access to a gun when I see something like this. They are pure evil. So they're talking about trans people here. And this is just like horrifying. I mean, this isn't a real threat. And like, I don't think we should be concerned about this. But it is fucking grim. Like, but what's important here is this is based off just a lie. So here they're actually talking about a trans child. I think they're talking about Jazz Jennings. And Transgender Trend have said a neo-vagina will close up if not dilated every day because it's not a vagina, it's a wound. When school guidance suggests a child might want a body that matches their gender identity, here's a reality check. This is why we do what we do. So, firstly, trans women's vaginas don't close up if they're not dilated every day. Early on in the healing process, you do need to dilate quite a lot at the start, more than once a day, and then it trails off and it gets to the point where it's very infrequently, or if you're having sex with a partner, you don't really need to, depending on a whole host of things. But this is just, like, plainly false. That's just not true. It won't close up either. Like, close up, it makes it sound just like it's going to be a zip. It just gets tighter and shrinks without use. And in fact, whenever you look for dilators, which is basically like a medical dildo, this is getting demonetized. Whenever you look at those, they're actually for cis women because there is a condition that cis women can get where things get tight and they need to dilate. And as with all trans healthcare, like, it was never designed for trans people. It was designed for cis people, and then they like, oh, this will work for trans people too. Because there were just more cis people. Like, there's like 1,000 cis people for every one trans person. Of course, all the medicine was made for them. Then they've said it's a wound. It's not a wound. If it's a wound, your body would heal up. That's what they're trying to suggest. They're trying to suggest it's like you've cut something with a knife and pulled it open, and your body's trying to heal it up like it's a cut. And that's just totally nonsense. Like, at the start, I mean, it's surgery. And then when all the surgery heals, it's not a wound anymore. Obviously. Like, it's like claiming that a skin transplant is a wound even after it's healed. It's just not. That's just, like, completely wrong. It's wrong in every single sense. It's just, like, total nonsense. So they're just, like, completely lying here. Also, it's worth pointing out that some of the techniques used to make trans women's vaginas were actually originally made for intersex women who were born without them or with some condition where they benefit from some surgery in those lines. So this is as well just shitting over some cis women and some intersex women, as almost all gender critical positions do. So I'm just kind of horrified that they can just, like, they can lie about this stuff. There's no way that they could have ever talked to a trans person. Every single trans person who's been out for more than like 6 months knows that this is nonsense. So no one could ever have this opinion without being like chronically ignorant. And then they're spreading it, and you know, they're a big organisation in the UK. And then you get these angry, crazy people who are violent about it and are learning from this misinformation and are getting violent about it. And they, of course, did nothing about this at all. Didn't call it out or, like, just ridiculous. Anyway, just to show how bad transgender trend are, this was another one from this week. They're saying older teens away from home at uni for the first time are vulnerable. Some have mental health problems. I mean, that's true. It's completely unrelated. They join the LGBTQI gang and become trans. No, they don't. Uni culture is transition happy. Adult services affirm and give hormones. And then they are arguing against that. What they're noticing here is that a lot of kids live with abusive families and then come out when they go to university. I mean, loads of people come out as something when they go to university. It's like a classic time. It's where you go to find yourself. So for the American viewers or anyone else, university is our word for college. It's just like when you're 18 and you leave home and you go and get drunk a lot and you kind of, you know, you grow into the adult that you're going to be for the rest of your life. And it's when a lot of gay people come out. It's when a lot of trans people come out. It's when people find their political ideology. It's just when you grow up. And like they're trying to slip in this, some have mental health problems here to suggest that people saying they want to be trans for attention. It's the same homophobic arguments from 20 years ago, repurposed. Like this group is one of the worst ones, and they're just constantly pushing this kind of stuff. They were recently just openly advocating for conversion therapy for children, including forcing gender stereotypes on them whilst claiming to be gender critical. Disgusting organisation. Anyway, whilst we're talking about hilarious lies that they've all told each other and believed, this guy just jumped into my tweets and was like, I hope you're enjoying your sex change. So, you know, this is going to be good to start with. Like, thanks, mate. I'm enjoying the process of changing sex. Like, such a nonsense way of... Imagine saying that. Like, I hope you're enjoying your kidney transplant. Like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was kind of like actually hoping for the process hoping for the bit at the end rather than the process. But like, okay. Then they go on to say, bone density good, orgasms painful, heart healthy, voice sound good. You can always detransition like thousands of others. So I actually got a few more screenshots from this guy just saying this to like other people, just pressuring them to detransition. Like just going into random people's mentions, random trans people and being like, why don't you detransition? Like again, example 1 trillion of gender critical people projecting. They always say that trans people are pressured into transitioning, which is just never true for anyone. And then they literally go around pressuring people to detransition. If you talk to a lot of detransitioners, lots of them get kind of pulled politically towards the anti-trans position. I see lots, I don't know if that's really fair. Some detransitioners become anti-trans and become gender critical, and lots of them go there at the start and then break away from it when they realise how horrible it is. There's been quite a few detransitioners that I've seen recently who have spoken out about this. And like, I do also know ex-gender critical trans people. Most of them, in fact, the ones who I know, had a lot of pressure to detransition when they were gender critical. And it really is pressured on people. I mean, as all trans people know, there's always pressure to detransition or to stop transitioning or to not come out. Like, of course there is. But anyway, the rest of this I just thought was so ridiculous. Imagine just going up to some random woman and asking if her orgasms were painful. Like, what are you on about? I mean, for the record, I don't know what my bone density is. I assume it's fine. There's no reason it wouldn't be. My orgasms aren't painful. My heart was healthy last time it was checked, and you can make up your own mind on my voice. So, absolutely embarrassing attempt at trying to walk in and suggest that I've ruined my life. Like, mate, my sex change was actually brilliant. So, unlucky me. And talking of ridiculous biology, this is from a doctor. I can only presume a doctor in something nonsense. I don't know. I'm not going to pick something because there'll be someone in the comments who is a doctor in that. I'll go with a doctor in electronics because I'm an electronic engineer, so I can rip on us. And they've said everyone can sense your chromosomes and everyone else's chromosomes with their eyes. For at the presence of or an absence of a functioning Y. No, you can't, mate. You cannot see chromosomes. They're microscopic. They're inside the nucleus of your cell. And I guess they're trying to imply that you can see what chromosomes have caused someone to develop. But this is just the we can always tell argument, which is just obviously false. And again, ignoring intersex people. So, standard. I just love it when like they come in and like, I can see your chromosomes. I can smell your chromosomes from here. Like, don't think you can, mate. Oh, just a little weak dig here. Someone just replied to me, give it up, Katie Montgomery. Males will never be females. I bet they were so proud of themselves when they wrote Montgomery. It's like, I feel like if when I was 13, if someone had said this to me, if I'd been out at 13 and someone had said this, I would have been embarrassed for them. Because this is like a primary school insult. This is the kind of insult that when you get to secondary school, you think sounds like something a kid would say. And then males will never be females. Yeah, I'll agree with that one. I'm fine with that. Good argument, mate. I'm glad that you managed to fit the word man into my surname. Very witty, very intelligent. Good stuff. So this one was good as well. There's a few little quick rapid fire ones here. There was a collection of these. So this person is talking about somewhere in Yorkshire in the UK called Hebden. And they're like, Hebden, not so much anymore. The whole valley has been transed. So shout out to anyone from Yorkshire. If you're a trans person, then perhaps you should go to Hebden because apparently 100% of the people in Hebden are trans people. And I just thought I'd also highlight, I think this has already come up, this word, probably every single episode and definitely already today. Transed is their word for transition. And the reason they say this is they try and take agency away from the trans person. So you say, I transition, and they'll say, you were transed. And it's to try and go in with this conspiracy theory that Big Pharma is tricking people into transitioning, or that parents are forcing their children to transition. And it's just a way of taking that away from trans people and saying it wasn't their decision, or they weren't in control of it. Because they have to have their own words for everything, because that's what cults do. So this person has come up, I think, probably in about half the episode so far. They have a different picture every time, though, so I couldn't tell you who they were. But this is someone who's been replying to me to almost all of my tweets for the last 6 months. I don't know. I keep hangers on like this because although they're pretty tedious, they do come out with some right stuff. And this person, I don't know, deep into the mentions on some tweet or other, said, you've never heard of Trans Bobby? Someone's like, no. Who are they? And when can I hang out with them because they sound cool? Like, obviously joking with them. And they're saying, you'll find them sniffing around online for vulnerable kids. What? And then this person's like, I think, like, I was also confused here. And this is when I found it. They were like, is this an actual person or is this someone you made up in your head? Like, what are you talking about? Trans Bobby. And then they're like, it's the boogeyman. What? What are you talking about? Where is this? Like, Bobby? Who? I can't. Lots of these, like, I mean, like the previous one, you can kind of see where they're coming from. They'll be like, oh, there's a lot of trans people in this village, or several of the people I know here, or something. But this, like, where has this come from? What, like, series of events has led to them walking up to someone and being like, have you heard of Trans Bobby? He's the boogeyman. Like, I honestly can't even imagine where this has come from. If you know where it's come from, I genuinely want to know, because I know most of their conspiracy theory garbage. I can usually see how they've got to where they're coming from, or I can see how they got to where they are, or see where they're coming from. But this one, absolutely no idea. Just thought, like, okay. Right, so shout out to Trans Bobby. Here's another exciting conspiracy theory. Turns out this person has been pushing this. So this one's actually from December, and I recently saw it this week. But they've been, when I searched for this tweet to see if there was a newer one, they've been tweeting this for ages, months and months and months. They've been saying the same thing to countless people, and they're saying same-sex attraction was co-opted by pharma during the AIDS crisis and made into corporate identities, LGB, for profit. Very hard to expand a market based on sexual dimorphism. Enter gender identity, the deconstruction of sex, and market swings open for identity marketing and changing human bio. Like, what are you talking about? Oh my goodness. Like, I love how in the middle, there's so much here. I love how in the middle they've been like, it's very hard to expand a market based on sexual dimorphism. I'm just, like, when you're like selling an argument to someone and you just have a point where you'd be like, oh, and obviously it was raining, so I got an umbrella. And anyway, and we'll move on to the next thing. You just like the thing like, oh, and obviously it's very hard to expand a market based on sexual dimorphism. What? What does that even mean? Do you even know what sexual dimorphism means? What does... Absolute madness. However, unlike the last one, I kind of know where this one's come from. They've tried to... they're trying to suggest that trans people and apparently gay and bisexual people are like a product of big corporations rather than of, nature. I think they're trying to argue that same-sex attraction is like a thing that happens in nature, but the idea of then acting on it or reacting to it, becoming a gay person is like a corporate thing. And apparently that was all a big plan, all a big ploy from Big Pharma to make thousands of pounds a year. There isn't much money in transition because there aren't many trans people and most of the drugs are generic and they haven't actually ever made any medicine specifically for trans people, which they would do if it was a product that made them any money. Just completely nonsense. But I just thought it was a good little conspiracy theory that this person's been sticking to for potentially years. Right, so burn of the week. So this wasn't me, but this was just so good that I had to include this. So shout out to Ben Cohen here, who is one of the owners or the editor of Pink News. Sorry, I should have looked that up before we started this. But anyway, he's good. So here he is talking to one of the UK's homophobic and transphobic politicians, Jackie DP. And he's like, other than the constant opportunities to attract the trans community, I was wondering what you have ever done for lesbians. Obviously, beyond voting against their rights to get married to other lesbians. So this politician comes up a lot. She's always talking about lesbians in order to attack trans people, but she has been absent or voted against every single gay rights legislation in her entire career. Even like recent ones where there's, little tweaks or stuff to do with gay people at all, she's voted against it. Absolutely terrible politician, definitely needs voting out. And so, and she's just talking about, we need to defend lesbians. It's like, we need to defend them from you, because you're the kind of person who's been fighting against their rights. Literally, your entire life has been about that. So he said that, and of course she didn't reply. She's absolutely rubbish person. And then someone else has come in and is like, what have you ever done for lesbians, Benjamin? Sorry, I probably shouldn't have shortened him to Ben. What have you ever done for lesbians, Benjamin? You seem to support the trans ones and not the adult human female ones. Like, ha, one-upped. So obviously Benjamin got totally wrecked here. And then he said, I founded and chaired the campaign for same-sex marriage, which your friend voted against. Absolutely amazing. Imagine coming at the person who founded and chaired the campaign for same-sex marriage whilst they're arguing with someone who voted against it and demanding that they do something for lesbians. Like, absolutely incredible. Then he's like, why don't you just list Jackie's achievements for lesbians? I must have missed them. So good. Like, I literally screamed when I saw this first time. 10 out of 10. Like, oh, it's just so good. I love these dunks. One of my absolute favourite ones that came up like this, they often happen to women because it's often loads of men like pretending they know more than women. But obviously they happen to gay people too, they happen to trans people. It's just a kind of thing that the ignorant knobheads come in with, like pretending they know more than all of the minority they're talking about. But one of my favourite ones of these is by a lady called Gail Simone, who wrote some comics. I don't know anything about comics, but she posted like this bookshelf of all of her comics, and she has every issue of this one series of comics. I have a feeling it might have been Punisher, but I don't know this for sure, and I don't know anything about that. And so she just posted this photo, and everyone was commenting underneath like, oh, it's amazing. And some guy underneath was like, so what? You've got all of the issues of that comic. You're not a real fan, or something like that. And she's like, look who wrote them. And then you zoom in, and on the spine of every single one of them, it has her name. It's just so incredible. Like, imagine trying to one-up the person who wrote your favourite comic. Absolutely pathetic. Anyway, this one was up there. This one was amazing. Like, so good. So, back to the nonsense. The phrase TERF is the equivalent of the N-word. Then a couple of other slurs, etc. It's wielded by those pretending to be allies of the LGBTQI when it's just a way to hate and then sneer and push aside anyone who objects to its use. Yet again, the media fails its primary function. This tweet was deleted, so I don't even know what I'm talking about. So the classic response to this is, if TERF is the equivalent of the N-word, why is it that you'll say the word TERF, but you won't say the N-word? If one of the words, I'm stealing this off someone else, but if one of the two words you're comparing is so bad you won't even say it, then that is the worst word. Obviously, they are absolutely desperate to have their own N-word. I think that a lot of this does happen a lot. Loads of people like trying to claim that some word used against them is their own N-word. I mean, there are lots of slurs for trans people and for gay people, which have for centuries been used to justify violence against them and marginalise them and stuff. But it's still different to the N-word, even if they are still really horrible slurs with huge histories of violence and oppression. And I don't really think it makes, there's nothing gained from saying, oh, this is our N-word. Oh, tranny is just as bad as the N-word. It doesn't matter. There's no point comparing them here. If you're a member of that group, of both groups, then maybe you can have that discussion. But otherwise, it doesn't matter. There are some slurs which are targeted at you that are really bad, and that's, for you to know about and for other people to disrespect and stop saying and fuck off about. Anyway, TERF is not one of those, because in order for it to be a slur, it has to be used to oppress people. And TERFs are the oppressors, so that obviously doesn't make any sense here at all. It's like saying Nazi is a slur, or bigot, or homophobe, or something. Like, it's said often with a lot of, like, bile in, you know, people say, oh, like, you fucking Nazi or whatever. Like, of course, it's said in a bad thing, because it's a bad thing to be, mate. That's why. And then this little claim here, like, I mean, that's the main thing here, that's nonsense. But there's also this little claim that they always try. They're trying to say that people are called TERF. The people who are called TERFs are anyone who objects to its use. That doesn't make sense. No, if you're saying that the reason people are called TERFs is because they object to other people being called TERFs, how did it start? Where does this come from? They always have to try and pretend that, oh, you know, the reason I was called TERF, all I did was say women should have rights, and then they called me a TERF. It's like, no, that isn't what happened. Just say your actual position. The reason you get called that is because you want to ban trans women from public spaces. Don't try and pretend. Stop wussing away from your own position. If you want to ban trans women from women's spaces, say it. Stop being a coward. Stop saying, oh, all I did was this. No, not all you did was this. It's pathetic. You know exactly why people are calling you that, and it's because of a political position that you have chosen to support, which is bullshit. So it's not a slur. Fuck off. So, we're back to the old mental illness garbage. Such a classic claim. I feel like this claim comes less from the culty, gender critical people. I mean, it does, but it's always a little bit different. But this is a very entry-level, idiot, reactionary position against trans people. And you see it a lot from, like, Elon Musk fanboy dude bros. And it's where they'll just say, being trans is a mental illness. Full stop, that's the end of my argument. Therefore, you can't be trusted with anything because you're mentally ill, and mentally ill means crazy, and your opinion is worthless. And that's kind of like the full argument. And there's a whole host of problems with that. Obviously, having a mental illness doesn't mean that you're not a credible person, or you can't make an argument. Depression is a mental illness. So, obviously, that's a complete nonsense argument from the outset. But then also, being trans isn't a mental illness. So, firstly, it's not a mental illness. Secondly, even if it was, that wouldn't justify what you're saying. And, like, it being a mental illness is just a categorization the experts decide upon. And it was declassified as a mental illness a couple of years ago by the World Health Organization. The NHS, I think, did it before that. There's a whole host of medical boards around the world, and they've all declassified it. Apart from one case, I think the DSM in America still has it classified as that, and it's for insurance reasons. They were worried if they declassified it, which is what the science says, then trans people would be denied healthcare, so they decided to keep it on for that reason. Anyway, so I was like, being trans isn't a mental illness. I'm talking to someone else here saying, given how long you've spent on harassing trans people, there's absolutely no way you're not aware of that. It's some journalist who writes for The Times who has been attacking trans people for way longer than being trans has been officially depathologized. So it's complete bullshit. So then this idiot chimes in, yes, it is, 100%. So I was like, well, all the international experts are saying one thing, and you, a total layman, are saying another. What makes you think your opinion is worth anything? This is just such a classic thing that you encounter all the time. Someone's like, well, I have read a Wikipedia article and 4 articles from the Daily Mail, so therefore I can authoritatively say that global warming doesn't exist. Like, all the experts are saying one thing, mate, and all the dickheads are saying something else. Why do you think their opinion's worth anything? Why do you think your opinion is worth anything? It's literally worthless to me, because you haven't done decades of researching to get to your view. You haven't seen any of the evidence. Like, if you have some evidence to show that it is a mental illness, then, go and present it to the international medical community and probably publish some papers, get some money, like, go and work for university or something. Absolute nonsense. And so they replied with the absolutely intellectual powerhouse argument of, how about you just fuck off? Which I mean, it's kind of brave of them, because that's a proper, just storm out the room, isn't it? Well, actually, mate, all of the experts disagree with you, so what do you say to that? Fuck off! Yeah, okay, so I was like, well, it's about the calibre of argument I was expecting, to be honest. And they said, get used to it. We normal people have had enough of your bullshit. And this is the classic, Michael Gove quote of the century, I think, which he was saying about Brexit, which is, people are sick of experts. And it's true. People, normal people, like this reactionary idiot, are sick of experts. And that's why the world is in such a state, because so many people have decided to just ignore the people who know what they're talking about and listen to idiots. And this is a classic example. All the experts are saying one thing, and these idiots aren't even capable of making an argument. And then when I point out, they're like, get used to it. I am used to it. That's what this show's all about. This show is all about people who have absolutely worthless opinions failing to make arguments. So don't worry, mate. I think most trans people are used to it. So this is another mental illness one. So this guy's he was saying, accusing me of not being able to, stop stuttering a bit there. The classic is, they'll say, being trans is mental illness. And I'm like, no, it isn't. Here's what the experts say. And then they're like, well, what is it then? As if it's not a mental illness, it must be something else that you can explain to me. It must be a different category. And officially, according to the World Health Organization, it's a condition related to sexual health. And if you look at the World Health Organization's reasoning for this, they decided, similar to that one that I was just talking about, they weren't going to remove it completely because they were worried if they removed it completely, then trans people wouldn't be able to get healthcare in many countries. So they've kept it in as a condition, but they've depathologized it, which means it's no longer considered a mental illness. So it doesn't need curing. It's like a condition that can benefit from treatment. So they always try and make this argument well, what is it if it's not a mental illness? And then when you can't say it, or you say this, they're like, so it must be a mental illness, because they're trying to create this false dichotomy between mental illness and whatever else. But that doesn't make any sense, because being gay used to be classed as mental illness, and then they declassified it as a mental illness. And then what was it? If it's not a mental illness, what is it? Well, it's being gay. It's not a mental illness. It's just a thing that people are. It's its own category. I mean, you can categorize it with other things if you want, but all the categorization is arbitrary, isn't it? Because being gay is being gay. That's what it is. That's it's not a problem with people. We used to think it was politically, people decided that it was a problem with people because they're homophobic dickheads, and then we overturned that bullshit. And now it's not. And it's the same with being trans. So I've said, I made all that argument, being gay isn't a mental illness, this is all just nonsense. And then classic gender critical man has said, being trans is not like being gay, though being gay doesn't make a girl want her healthy breasts cut off. Only being trans does that. And this is just such a classic gender critical man thing to do. Gender critical people come out with some disgusting stuff, and their whole ideology is completely junk. But there's a lot of the men in it. I might go as far to say all, or at least most of the men in it, are just misogynists who have realised they can have an outlet for their misogyny by saying it against trans people and pretending to care about teenage girls. And it's you can often tell the difference between them and the gender critical women by how they argue and the things they say. And I mean, often because they're just constantly misogynistic to you. As we've seen in previous episodes, they'll be misogynistic to me whilst calling me a man, like at the same time, the same things, because they just can't help themselves from being misogynistic because it's like so baked into who they are. And this is just a classic example. So there's this kind of argument that trans kids are being damaged by transition. You know, like, oh, if they have surgery, if they have hormones, it's ruining them for life. And at best, that's like just ignorance and science denial. And actually, an ability to empathise with someone who is forced to be in the wrong body, but without realising that. Like, if you're horrified at the idea of someone transitioning, then that's a good like sign that you're a cis person, because trans people aren't horrified at that. In fact, lots of them, before they came out, dream of that all the time. But anyway, so that's like the most legit version of this argument, is the transition can damage people. You know, there are people who transition and do truly regret it, and it is bad for them. So you can worry about that. And then when you enter into like the more extreme gender critical space, it gets phrased as like mutilating children, like that kind of thing. But then when you get into the creepy end of it, like that's already grim. But when you start getting into the gender critical man side, they always focus on young girls and they always focus on breasts. And there's like, it's when one of them does it, it's just not enough to instantly say, oh, well, this guy is instantly like some kind of pedo pervert. Like, that's completely ridiculous to assert that off one thing, although this is kind of yuck. But there's such a pattern of this happening that when this come up, this is what all the gender critical men jump to. Like, it's just such a common thing. The amount of times I have to hear some greasy 40 or 50-year-old man talk about young girls' healthy breasts. Like, just grim. God, like absolutely rank. I just can't imagine being around men who I thought like were ideologically aligned to me, who talk like this about teenage girls. Or in this case, teenage boys who have been miscategorized. Anyway, nonsense. Oh, this guy did actually then go on to post some paper which said the exact opposite of what he's arguing, and I was going to include it because I was going to try and like get one of those every week, because it pretty much happens every week, but it was kind of hard to show in screenshots, so it was a bit unfortunate. I tried to get it in, but like there was so much in the paper to read, it was quite difficult to present in a good way, but it was a funny cell phone anyway, so you can just laugh to yourself that happens every single week. So another one of the kind of, I would say big pieces of news, but it wasn't really big in comparison to the Biden thing. But earlier this week, a few articles came out about butch lesbians who had, since the anti-trans campaign has kicked off, since gender critical has been a thing, have experienced much more abuse in bathrooms, in women's bathrooms and women's changing rooms and stuff, because of their gender presentation. And I mean, obviously, as if this wasn't going to happen. This was always going to happen. If you raise fears about trans people, women who look like men are going to get abuse. And that will affect quite a lot of trans people. But because, as we were talking about earlier, cis people outnumber trans people so much, the majority of the people who are targeted by this are cis women. Of course. Like, as if there's no other way this could ever happen. So loads of the big LGBT organisations were commenting on this because, like, it's a classic example of, like, how LGBT phobia is all kind of linked, in that, for sure, this is based on transphobia, but then in reality, the majority of the people being targeted end up being cis lesbians, and it kind of ends up just being, like, kind of homophobic. You look wrong to me, therefore I'm going to ruin your day. It's bullshit. So they all talked about that, and the gender critical people didn't like this. Most of them went on to deny it. I should have included a load of screenshots of them denying it. There was a lot of denying going on until Biden did his thing, like a couple of days later. Lots of them just straight out saying it doesn't happen. Lots of them saying, oh, it must happen sometimes, but, oh, never happens. I mean, of course it never happens to any of these people because they're all like middle class, like patriarchy people, aren't they? Like, gender conforming types. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But anyway, so his Mayor Forstater, who is the lady who had her contract not renewed for her campaigning against trans rights on the internet, and who J.K. Rowling bigged up. And she's like trying to spin it in a positive, gender critical way. I don't think this campaign message works quite the way they think it does. The head of policy notes from personal experience that women are commonly concerned about whether there are men in the ladies' toilets. That is exactly what they're saying, yes. Nowadays, since 2018, since the gender critical campaign kicked off, people have started worrying about this imaginary idea of a predatory man, like, pretending to be a trans woman in order to sneak into the toilet when they could just walk in anyway, or when they could just pretend to be a cleaner, or when they could just assault someone anywhere else in the world rather than in the toilet. When you drum that kind of fear up, when the Times publishes an article about that twice a week for 4 years, the public starts worrying about it. Like, trans women have used women's spaces for my entire life, for Mayor's entire life, probably for everyone here's entire life, unless you're like 100 or something. And even then, like, I don't know. Trans women in the UK have just always used women's spaces. Up until 1999, there was no law about it at all. In 1999, you were allowed to use women's spaces. And in 2010, they made those protections stricter, more secure, not stricter, less strict, I guess. And in all that time, people haven't been worrying about this. And all of a sudden, since the gender critical movement started, people have started worrying about this. And that's the exact point that we're making. Yes, lots of women are now concerned about this because you've been lying to them, because you've been drumming up bullshit, and now women are losing out in two ways, because women are now worrying about something they don't need to worry about because it's been fine all their lives and nothing has changed, and they're being, like, accused, potentially had the police called on them, potentially assaulted. Like, in America, this could get really serious if they start accusing, black people and start getting the police involved. Like, this, it's grim, and it's for nothing. So, actually, what Stonewall is saying isn't. It is exactly as effective as saying is you didn't realise that, or you've tried to spin it. Nonsense. So you should all be drinking on nonsense. Apparently, that's my word of the week. So this is like a classic thing that you get from like this 19-year-old boy type. They'll come in, they'll talk about UFC or mixed martial arts, and then they'll try this, they'll do the like, so what? Arnold Schwarzenegger could just say he's trans tomorrow and just compete in women's sports. Like, no, because why would he say that? Because he's a cis person, and like he's 70, so he's not competing in sports anyway. And also, if he did want to compete in sports, then he'd have to go through hormone replacement therapy, which would change his abilities. So it's a completely nonsense argument. And this guy's gone for a slightly different angle. So I can't transition if I wanted to. Why are you lying? So he's trying to do for like, so I could just say that I was a woman tomorrow. So I'm like, well, go on then. Do it. Like, offended idiots always say this. They always say anyone could transition. They always say they could transition. And they never will, because do you know why they don't? Do you know why random men don't transition into women to win at sports or to go to the toilet and be a pervert, whatever? Because transition is horrible for cis people. And it's good for trans people. And being denied transition is horrible for trans people and good for cis people. Obviously. So when you're like, oh, so I could just transition, like, you could, but you're not going to because you're a cis person. So then they've said some people would do it to take advantage and have a better life. Yeah, mate, so much better being the trans person. Definitely, my life got so much easier when I came out. Good point. But for some reason, you can't even fathom why? I, a trans person, can't fathom the idea of someone going through 4 years of absolutely intense social change, physical change, monetary expenses, all this kind of nonsense. And then for what advantage? I mean, the advantage I get out of it is my life is better. But if you're a cis person, you won't get that. And other than that, I've got nothing like it's a benefit other than loads of lovely friends and a show where I shout loads about tweets, and get a sore voice. So anyway, then I've said, oh no, someone else says, can you elaborate? Then like, elaborate on what's stopping me from transitioning. You seem to be ducking and diving here and saying I'm horrible. I was like, just do it and show us wrong. Like, come on, transition, stop being a coward. And they're like, yeah, because that's the lengths I'd have to go to prove my point. Yes. The lengths that someone would have to go to prove you right would be extreme. And that's my whole argument. No one goes to those lengths. Because if, like, whatever you want to do, if you want to cheat at sport, if you want to perv at women in the toilets, if you want to whatever, all of that is so much easier to do in hundreds of other ways. Like if you want to cheat at sport, people are going to take drugs which improve their performance. They're not going to take 2 years out of their career and take drugs that not only make their performance worse, but permanently change them for the rest of their lives and endure all of the social stuff that comes with it. Like, why would anyone do that when you can cheat in a different way? Why would anyone transition to go into the women's toilets when they could just walk into the women's toilets? Or they could just wear a high-vis jacket and say they're a cleaner, taking a broom or something. It just doesn't make any sense. It never makes any sense. All of their arguments are so rubbish. And I was like, well, you won't do it because you're a cis person. I just thought it was a funny little exchange. Like, imagine coming in with the argument like, well, I could just transition. Like, all right. Go on then. Dare ya. So, this was a hilarious thing. So this first person is a cis woman, just so we know. So they've said, why is this guy, so they're talking about this guy who's coming up in a sec, why is this guy surprised that the vast majority of all women, indeed all people, don't care what he thinks? Imagine having a life so empty that you obsess about other people's genitals. People he will never, ever meet. How utterly sad. And she's right. That's a good little summary of gender critical men. And he's like, oh man, this is so cringe. Not true. I have been educated on these matters by women. You've lost touch with what feminism is. Fem equals female. Female. Trans women are males. What's sad is that you're a male supporting other males who destroying women's sex-based rights. You are 100% patriarchy. Then she's like, really? You know my medical history? Thanks, that's just an easy report to Twitter. Hint, wrong birth sex and wrong gender, you insecure little man. So I was confused about this wrong gender thing. I did check. I'm pretty confident that she was a she and said she was a cis woman in her bio. And if she is a they, and if they are a they, or if they are non-binary, or if she's non-binary, I apologise, but I did check and I'm fairly confident and I'm not quite sure what this gender comment is. But anyway, they're not a trans woman and that's what's important about this. So first of all, this is an absolutely classic example of a gender critical person walking in and just calling a random woman a man for disagreeing with them. Secondly, this is a classic example of a gender critical man speaking on behalf of women. I've been educated on these matters by women. Females. Like, fuck off. Absolute loser. And then to just claim that someone, like, she's like, stop obsessing over people's genitals. And he's like, you're the patriarchy. Like, they've just picked up a bunch of buzzwords. They have absolutely no idea what they mean. They just know that this is what you're supposed to do. This is the order you're supposed to string them together in order to hide the fact that you're just perving about random women's genitals on the internet and calling them men for disagreeing with you. Absolutely embarrassing. They're, like, probably lots of the Twitter veterans will actually know who this guy is. He's been around for a while and he's one of these people who is like 100% confidence 0% intelligence. And he just, absolutely, he's relentless. I don't ever know if he realizes he's been owned, but it's so funny when he walks in and says something and it's just an exact contradiction of what he's just said. He constantly owns himself and it's amazing, which is why I haven't blocked him. This one was amazing. This is one of my favourite ones in the whole week. So we're coming to the end now. I'm not sure how we're doing for time. Oh, we've gone way over. That's because of the technical difficulties at the start. This is like the last two, so don't worry, everyone. Hang on. And this is one of my favourite ones for the whole week. So this was a very true story from someone who I think was a man, but I'm not certain. They said, my wife is a trans woman, on hormones for 15 years, all surgeries done, hasn't stepped foot in a gym in her lifetime. She can murder me with her bare hands without even trying. Strength, muscle mass, lung, heart size, capacity, height, hand size, less body fat, it remains. Absolutely incredible. So, 100% straight up, first of all, this is just definitely false. They just tried too hard. They've conjured up this like trans woman who's transitioned 15 years ago, who's never been in the gym and can murder people with her hands. Like, it's false straight away because absolutely anyone who has even had a trans friend for 1.5 years will know that muscle mass and body fat change like drastically, and they're like the two biggest changes of HRT. And if you were married to a trans person, you would know that. Like, that's kind of the main reasons to take HRT, or some of the main reasons, is to like change your appearance and redistribute your body fat and change how your muscles look and balance and work, along with like, you know, psychological changes and stuff as well. But like, I mean, it's just so obviously false. Perhaps if you're a cis person watching this, who doesn't know many trans people, this might not be so obvious to you, but I absolutely promise that if you show this to any trans person you know, they will laugh and they will know for a fact that it is just like total bullshit, just hilarious. But I just thought some of these other like little comments, little things that they've tried to make it sound reasonable, just extra funny as well. All surgeries done, like all of them. What ones do you include here? Like, I know one trans woman who had a toe shortening procedure. Like, does that count? What surgeries? What are you talking about? I mean, this usually idiots like this will just say the surgery because they think there's only one, but they were obviously trying to make it a bit more credible by saying all of them. No, I know there were more than one. And then also they're talking about like who here? Put your hand up now if you know. Not only do you know the heart size and capacity of your significant other, but you know its change over time. What are you talking about, mate? It's so embarrassing. And then like, she can murder me with her hand, like wrong tense as well. But like, how would you know if someone could murder you with her hand? What are you on about? It's so embarrassing. I can't believe you wrote like. They wrote this as like part of some argument to prove that trans women shouldn't be in sport. Embarrassing. Oh, I think this is the last one. This is just a little classic little ender, classic gender critical garbage. There are only women, adult human females. There is no cis and trans. If there are no trans people, mate, what are you wasting your life on? Why are you here 24 hours a day harassing people who are not trans or cis about trans or cis? Nonsense. What a joke. Anyway, yes, that indeed was the last one. Yes, that's what I wanted. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for sticking around. Thank you for sticking for my little panic at the start about technical difficulties. It's so annoying. I popped the YouTube chat out so I could see it at the same time as like everything that's going on, and it just froze. And so I assumed that I'd like disconnected somehow. And I was also concerned about this little fuzzy stuff in the corner. Please ignore that. So last week was my first ever one without any technical bullshit, and I was excited for that to be the new trend, and I promise from now on there will be no technical issues. But anyway, thank you very much for watching This Week in the TERF Wars with me, Katie Montgomery. I would love you to like and subscribe if you would like to. This is now a regular thing. Every Friday at 9 o'clock UK time, I'll be going through these nonsense arguments, and it's usually going to be about 1 hour long. So thank you very much for stopping by. I love you all, and I will see you all soon.